found himself implicated in the Stauffenberg Plot to assassinate Adolf Hitler. Rommel, who was seen as a national hero, was then given a choice which virtually signalled his death. Although Rommel wasn't executed in the usual means, being shot or by using the guillotine, Hitler offered him an ultimatum that ultimately was a death sentence for the Desert Fox. He was given a choice, all of three, which would result inevitably in his execution or his death. Today we look at the forced execution of Erwin Rommel, and remember to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Erwin Rommel was born on the 15th of November 1891 in Heidenheim in southern Germany. His father was a teacher and his mother was the daughter of a local government official. Little is known about his early life, but at the age of 18, Rommel sought a career inside of the military. He joined the Württemberg Infantry Regiment and in 1910 began to study as an officer in a cadet school. He was then commissioned as a lieutenant, and during the First World War he saw lots of action. He was noted for serving with distinction in the conflict, and he fought first on the Western Front in France and Italy. During a number of successful battles for the German army, he became a captain in early 1918. He was noted for having courage and for understanding his fellow soldiers, and from early on he showed a natural gift of leadership. After the war he was involved in suppressing uprisings of revolutionary communists in German cities. There was much political instability following the First World War in Germany, and Rommel was involved inside of the army to help the situation. He became known as someone who would negotiate with dissenters, and through this he earned much praise for his level-headed approach, avoiding massive violent attacks. In 1920, Rommel became appointed to the company command with the 13th Infantry Regiment in Stuttgart, and he stayed in this role for 9 years before becoming an instructor at the Dresden Infantry School. He then became a major, and more promotions came. He first met Adolf Hitler on the 30th of September 1934 as Hitler inspected his troops. During this time he wrote many books, and even Hitler owned copies of them. He flourished in his role as a military instructor, and Hitler was aware of this, assigning him to become a liaison officer inside of the War Ministry to the Hitler Youth. Here he was in charge with training, and he clashed with the Hitler Youth leader, Bauder von Schirach, over how the boys should be trained. Rommel wished to have the group overseen by the army and not the Nazis, which went against what Schirach and even Hitler wanted, and Rommel was then taken off this job. Much debate has emerged about Rommel and how integrated to the Nazi policies he actually was. He was noted around this time for his support of Hitler, stating that he was called upon by God and speaks like a prophet, and much debate has emerged about if Rommel was involved in the persecution of the Jews. There is much conflicting evidence about this. Some historians consider that he simply ignored the persecution that was emerging in Germany and that he looked the other way. He may have also clashed with SA members who were violently assaulting Jews in the street, but it is very unclear what his motives really were. It was during the Second World War that Rommel's reputation as a military general was really carved. He was promoted to General Major in August 1939 and became the commander of the Führerbegleiter Battalion, the group of soldiers responsible for guarding Hitler and his field headquarters during the invasion of Poland. It's believed he did not understand Hitler's intentions during this time, and Rommel was there during each daily military war briefing. He watched how tanks were used and how other units advanced, and he later wished to command one of Germany's panzer divisions. He received a promotion to general ahead of more senior officers, making others jealous as Hitler admired him. The promotion made him Hitler's favoured commander, and Rommel then took command of the 7th Panzer Division on the 10th of February 1940. He put them to work practising military tactics that they would use in the invasion of the Netherlands, Belgium and France. Rommel's division was an effective fighting force, and he demonstrated skill in the blitzkrieg tactic, and the German invasion of France was devastating. The French would sign an armistice on the 22nd of June, around 6 weeks after the invasion began. It was through the driving devastating tactics deployed by generals such as Rommel that caused chaos. After this, he in February 1941 became the commander of the German troops in North Africa, the Afrika Corps. The deserts of North Africa became the scene of his greatest victories, and he became known as the Desert Fox by his friends and enemies. He was known for these victories, and Hitler was very impressed with him. The German army in Africa did suffer from a lack of equipment, and supply issues tended to halt Rommel's successes. Hitler ordered an attack in the summer of 1942 on Cairo and the Suez Canal, and Rommel's exhausted German and Italian army was stopped by the British at El Alamein. The Egypt offensive was a bridge too far, and at the end of October 1942 he was defeated in the Second Battle of El Alamein, and in March 1943 Hitler ordered Rommel to come home. In 1944 he was trusted with defending the French Channel's coast against the Allied invasions which would occur. Rommel, who was used to mobile tactics, changed, and he sought to build huge coastal defences. Rommel believed that the only way of defending the beaches was in preventing the enemy from landing in any capacity. He changed some of his tactics and began to become in disagreement with other generals, but at some point he also began to become concerned at Germany's capacity to win the Second World War, and also in Hitler's leadership capabilities. In spring 1944, a number of Rommel's friends had joined together in clandestine groups to oppose the Führer, and they approached Rommel to suggest that it was his duty to take over from Hitler as a leader of the German war effort, and also as the head of state, once a possible overthrow of Hitler would go ahead. These men were later the men who were behind the Stauffenberg Plot, and Rommel did not reject the suggestion. However, the plotters never revealed to Rommel that the plan involved assassinating Hitler. Rommel himself would not have accepted this, as they knew he was opposed to murdering for political gain, and during the conflict he disregarded many orders from Hitler to execute men for political reasons. Following the Normandy landings, Rommel tried to point out to Hitler a number of times that the war was lost, and that he should consider negotiating with the Allies. On the 15th of July 1944, he wrote to Hitler requesting a last chance to end the hostilities with the Western Allies, but this letter arrived late. It's believed Rommel had the support of other generals and even SS officers, but on the 17th of July he was injured in an attack by Allied aircraft, and it's believed that this took the opportunity away from Rommel to be directly involved explicitly in the 20th of July plot. After the failed plan to assassinate Hitler, many of the conspirators were arrested and a huge Gestapo operation took place. It turned out that the net was much more wider than the Nazis originally believed. The reprisals for the bomb plot were bloody and saw the executions of many of the main plotters, but also others were implicated in the plan. Rommel too was one of those implicated, when a number of conspirators under torture had informed the police of Rommel's possible involvement. Martin Bormann reported to Hitler that Field Marshal Rommel was perfectly in the picture about the assassination plan, and he promised to be at the disposal of the new government. His house was then placed under Gestapo surveillance, and the suspicions were turned over to the Court of Military Honour. The court obtained the evidence that suggested Rommel was involved and blamed the general. The normal protocol would have dictated that Rommel would have been brought to Roland Friesler's People's Court that always sided with the Nazi prosecution. This would have ultimately resulted in the execution of Rommel, probably being beheaded using the guillotine, as many people classed as traitors endured this fate. Hitler, however, had a huge problem. Rommel was seen in Germany as a national hero, a man revered by the population for his victories over the enemies of Nazi Germany. His image was a strong propaganda one, and Hitler could not drag him out in front of the press to shatter this, as it would impact the morale of the country incredibly negatively. They needed to protect the image of him, and for this Hitler agreed not to execute him in the usual manner that a traitor would be subject to. Hitler therefore offered the Desert Fox the chance to take his own life. However, the options Rommel was given were ultimately a death sentence. On the 14th of October 1944, Rommel and his son had breakfast around 7 a.m, and following this they walked in their garden of their home. He announced to his family that 2 generals from Berlin were coming to the house to meet with him at noon, with many of his associates being arrested and executed. Rommel himself wished to be sent to the Eastern Front to fight, and before the meeting with the men, he changed into his Afrika Corps tunic. Wilhelm Burgdorf and Ernst Meisel arrived at the house and politely asked to speak with Rommel alone at noon. After getting him on their own, they gave him an ultimatum with no way out. This, in a sense, was the death sentence of Rommel. He was given three choices. First, to accompany the generals to Berlin so that Rommel could defend himself in front of Hitler. This is something that would ultimately have led to Rommel's execution at the hands of Hitler and his close inner circle. The second choice was that he could face the People's Court, which definitely would have resulted in his execution being beheaded by the guillotine. Or his third choice was that he should take his own life there and then. The first two options would have caused pain for his family, as it's likely that they would have suffered as well, and his staff would also have been executed. But with the option to take his own life, his image could be protected within German propaganda, and he was promised to be buried a hero and with full military honours, and that his family would receive a huge pension from him. Anticipating the choices, Wilhelm Burgdorf himself had brought a cyanide capsule with him in preparation. Rommel agreed to take his own life, but insisted on being able to tell his family what was actually going on, and the Nazis surprisingly agreed to this on the basis that it was kept totally secret. He explained to his son, "In a quarter of an hour, I'll be dead." His teenage son then responded with, "Can't we defend ourselves?" And a defeated Rommel said, "There is no point. It's better for one to die than for all of us to be killed in a shooting fray." Inside of the house was also Captain Hermann Oldinger, one of Rommel's closest and oldest friends, and he was isolated from the family by the Nazis and distracted, but when Rommel told him of his plan, he was ready to go down in a hail of bullets, fighting the Nazi generals rather than to surrender his own friend. Rommel refused the resistance and said, "I must go, they've only given me 10 minutes. He then put on his overcoat and made his way out of the house, taken by the generals, and he paused on the driveway to stop his dog following him. Outside was an SS driver who was waiting, and the two generals waved goodbye. He then got into Burgdorf's car, and Rommel was driven out of the town, with the two Nazi officials sitting each side of him to prevent his escape. It was inside isolated woodland near to the town of Herlingen where Rommel died. The road from the village passes up a steep hill and into a dense forest. There are a number of different accounts of Rommel's death that outline slightly different things. The car had disappeared into the forest, and after stopping, the driver and Meisel left the car, leaving Rommel alone with Burgdorf, who had brought the poison. It was claimed by the driver that when he returned he saw Rommel sobbing after consuming the cyanide, but this is doubtful, as it's claimed he returned 10 minutes later, seeing Rommel taking his last breaths, but cyanide killed usually within 3 minutes. It's mostly believed that Burgdorf, who'd stayed with Rommel to ensure he took his own life, after around 5 minutes summoned the others over, and what they saw was Rommel inside the car slumped over, with his field marshal's baton fallen from him. 20 minutes after he left his house, his family were telephoned and notified of his death. The public were informed that Rommel died of a heart attack or a cerebral embolism following the attack on his car. Hitler, to give credence to the false story, ordered a national day of mourning to commemorate his death, and a state funeral was held. The real truth behind Rommel's death was known to the Allies after an interview with Rommel's widow was conducted before the end of the Second World War, and his son also wrote a letter outlining what truly had happened. Despite Rommel not undergoing an execution in the traditional sense, the ultimatum he was offered by Adolf Hitler was a death sentence. Whichever option that the Desert Fox took would ultimately have resulted in either his execution or death, but Rommel foresaw what would happen if he did anything but select the option that took his own life. He's remembered as a skilled military general who was ultimately purged by Hitler following the tentative links to the plans to assassinate the leader of Nazi Germany. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.